From having it all to losing everything in just a few minutes, I'm Dakota Makris in West Liberty. We hear from one woman who lost her home during the 2012 tornado, but has a new perspective on life.
And with warmer weather arriving, you might be planning to take a few hiking trips. We talked to one search and rescue team about how to stay safe on the trails.
It's been a breathtakingly beautiful day today around the mountains, and even more of nature's beauty on the way. We head into the rest of the work week. I'll have all the details next at 6.
Dedicated to Eastern and Southern Kentucky, this is WYMT Mountain News at 6.
Good evening. Today marks the 10th anniversary of one of the worst natural disasters we have ever seen in Kentucky. The deadly tornado outbreak of March 2nd, 2012. 25 died, hundreds were injured, and hundreds of homes and businesses were destroyed. We have our team spread out across the region tonight, gathering, sharing, and listening to stories of those who were affected and continue to be even 10 years later. We begin our coverage with Brandon Robinson, who was on the air that night, and Dakota Makris. They're both live in downtown West Liberty.
All right, so Steve, we are here in West Liberty at this hour. The sun setting after a beautiful day, and right now, 10 years ago, tornadoes were ripping this community apart.
Much different scene. 10
Exactly.
years ago.
And you talked to someone who lives literally just over the hill from us.
Yeah, and
or lived just over the hill from us.
Yeah, and you talked to her, I think, about what, 3 years after?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and so she was gracious enough to talk to us again. Doris Shuck. Her house is no longer standing; it's just the foundation. So we talked to her 10 years later, just about what's different in her life and how she's moved on.
And wow.
644 Liberty Road.
I can remember my washer and dryer was over here, and we had a sofa here, we had an extra refrigerator.
An address Doris Shuck and her family called home for nearly 10 years.
We did actually go through periods where there was like a feeling of homesickness, and it was probably worse for my daughter, who was 10, than any of us. She would miss her bed or miss our nighttime routine, you know, because it took years to get back into a normal routine after that.
Doris is standing in her old basement of what was once a 2-story home. She was home alone in that basement when the tornado hit.
Such an unimaginable situation that it's not anything that you've ever prepared yourself for. Kind of took shelter on the floor once I realized it was a serious event, and I just started praying, to be honest.
She hunkered down near this chair that has remained untouched and weathered for years, and what felt like an eternity only lasted 3 minutes.
I just remember standing up and I could see the sky, and that was just a very odd thing to experience. And for some odd reason, I remember thinking, my kitchen table's gone. And then at some point it hit me, oh, my whole house is gone.
Once she stumbled out of the debris, someone drove by and took her to the hospital. Luckily, she was not injured.
I wanted to go there because I knew that would probably be the safest place to go, and I was hopeful that there would be a phone line or some way that I could communicate with my husband and my kids.
And thankfully, everyone made it.
You can only imagine how happy we were when a few hours later we got to reunite.
The family later moved across town, but they had to drive by their old home when visiting friends.
I think about all the good times we had here too. So it's not like that always overshadows the 8 years that we lived here.
What is left of 644 Liberty Road is covered in vegetation and cement blocks that once held up a house full of memories.
We have a lot of good memories of this. I mean, we still talk about 644 Liberty Road. I mean, it's, you know, a lot of our birthday parties and Christmases and get-togethers for the kids and the kids' friends, you know, this is where we gathered.
Well, when I was talking with Doris, she just wants to remind everyone, you never know when this could happen, so to keep your important documents in safety deposit boxes and to double-check your insurance policies, just to double-check your coverage. And now we head live to Eastrnstein with our reporter, Zach Hawk, who is in hard-hit Eastrnstein, where at least one tornado wore through the community. Zach, good evening to you.
Thanks, Dakota.
Yeah, that tornado claimed the lives of 6 people and destroyed nearly 400 homes. Now this afternoon I heard all about it from a man who was one of the first people on scene after the clouds cleared.
This is where it hit first.
Today, Albert Hale lives a quiet life in Laurel County, mostly taking in the views of his farm. But on March 2nd, 10 years ago, worried about what was coming, Hale was out for a drive.
We have a tornado on the ground, confirmed right here, I believe, near Bernstadt.
And it got real dark, real quick. And I said to her, this storm's gonna catch us before we get back to London.
Hale was the Laurel County Emergency Management Director that night. He rallied local fire departments and began searching the rubble of his own community.
It's just a drive. When you're involved in things like that, it's a drive. You strive to do the best you can do, knowing that, hey, it's us against the world.
Despite all that destruction, seeing people work together afterwards stuck with Hale.
A lot of good people comes together in a deal like that.
10 years later, Hale says he can still see the rubble when he is driving around.
You know, you say back to normal. I don't know that things ever get back to normal.
But you keep going forward. Now, I will say it does feel a little bit weird to be covering this story of all stories on such a beautiful day. But, you know, I'm just glad that the people of East Bernstadt were able to rebuild and are moving forward together. Live in Laurel County, Zach Hawk, WYMT, Mountain News. I'll kick it over to Brandon.
Amen, Zach. Glad to hear that, and glad those folks are back on their feet. It's been an interesting 10 years, to say the least. All right, let's get into our next story here. Incredible at what all of the men and women in our emergency services across the region did to help people that day. We also talked to 3 of our former reporters who covered the storms in the aftermath. We sent Katie Roach-Dietrich to hard-hit West Liberty the night of. One issue she and her team had is they ran into an issue there with the road leading into West Liberty being blocked by police. She also says communication was gone. She tells us that day broke a myth of how people felt about Eastern Kentucky weather.
Even to this day, that was the one thing that everybody kept saying in the days after, is like, nobody thought that this could happen. Nobody thought that tornadoes, especially ones that were that devastating, could happen in the mountains of Eastern Kentucky.
That myth was broken that night and in the years beyond. You can see more of Katie's interview in our upcoming special that airs Monday, March 14th at 7 p.m. right here on WYMT. Meanwhile, people in Salyersville say they remember the day just like it was yesterday. And even 10 years removed, the tornado is a thought every time the winds pick up. WYMT's Buddy Forbes shares their stories.
In the hills of Eastern Kentucky, we don't think that tornadoes were ever going to be here because there'd never been any.
In Salyersville, it's like a giant chainsaw sheared off the tops of trees before tearing into homes.
Jim Caldwell at the time was on the television, and he said, if you're in Salyersville, take cover now.
I've been able to see, it's unbelievable, just total devastation here.
Debris everywhere. I mean, it looked like a war zone. You seen the sky. And you could see the tornado as it was going on up.
March 2nd, 2012. A day forever spinning through the minds of those who never saw it coming.
It was hot, and it shouldn't have been, and it was stuffy, but I never dreamed of a tornado in Eastern Kentucky.
About from the top of the hill to the top of the hill, coming this way.
We heard something like a jet airplane, and it come, and it was just split second. It was awful.
Bringing the Salyersville community to its knees.
That we see every day. We were all praying, just crying. The kids were crying, and I mean, it was you can't really explain what's going through your mind at that time. I mean, everything's running through your mind. Am I going to make it out of here alive? Is my family going to be okay? Is my house going to be okay?
But through the destruction, the community avoided death.
Material things can be replaced, but your life can't. And we were just lucky that we didn't get killed that day.
Still, many believe it will never be a closed chapter, and the images will never fade. because it just takes the wind to stir it back up.
It scares me to death because a few days ago we had weather about like that, about like what it was the day before the tornado.
But they say the fear is no match for the strength they found.
But after 10 years, I mean, I'm still cautious of the weather, but I don't let it control me like it did the first couple years after the tornado.
By coming together,
So I think it's come back even better than it was before.
And building back the place they call home.
Really blessed to get back our lives, our livelihood, our normalcy.
In Salyersville, Buddy Forbes, WYMT Mountain News.
That's something we continue to hear over and over again here. Even the headline in the local paper here in West Liberty the week after, thank God so many were spared, or something to that. I'm sure I'm paraphrasing that. And Evan, right now, about this time, is when this community was in the height of that tornado, not just here in West Liberty, but up on other parts of Morgan County. The Woods Bend area got particularly hard hit, and then it just kept its trek of madness going across all the way through Kentucky into West Virginia on the ground. 86 total miles.
That's right, Brandon. One of the longest track tornadoes in eastern Kentucky history on that afternoon, and it wasn't done after it moved through West Liberty. It was actually a separate cell that moved in through portions of Salyersville and into Martin County as well. But 86 miles, an EF3 tornado, also one of the strongest tornadoes in eastern Kentucky history. Thankfully, 10 years later, all is quiet. We were talking about this earlier this week, about how the first week of March, you can often see different types of weather, from flooding to tornado outbreaks to even winter weather, and we've seen none of that this first week of March. We're only 2 days in, but it's been a beautiful day and a beautiful week so far. I-64 at Moorhead, we talked about sunset alert a little while ago, and it's still out there. If you're looking out there, look out to the west, because it's going to be a beautiful shot there, not just in Moorhead, but in Perry County as well. Buffalo Mountain camera, another beautiful shot there as the sun goes below the horizon this afternoon and evening. Temperatures remaining mild into the low to mid 60s. We should be in the low to mid 50s for daytime highs this time of year. So at 6 o'clock, the second day of March, being near 70 in Jacksboro, that is above average, and it feels great outside. Though once that sun sets, it is getting a bit chilly. Satellite and radar continuing with just a few of those high clouds into the Big Sandy. Nothing to worry about in terms of any kind of rain from that. So keep that WYMT weather app handy. Go ahead and download it if you don't have it already. It's a great tool to have in your arsenal when bad weather does come your way, as it likely will at some point this spring. It is entering severe weather season. That's why it is Severe Weather Awareness Week. We are down into the 50s overnight. Some of us dropping into the 40s as a few clouds work in ahead of our next system. I'll have the latest on what that system means for us and how that forecast looks heading into the weekend coming up in just a few minutes.
All right, Evan, thank you and all their crews covering the tornado anniversary tonight. Well, we have a big update tonight after nearly 4 years of trying to find a missing man in Leslie County. A rapid DNA test helped identify the body of 27-year-old Tyler North. Police began an investigation in June of 2018. In October of 2020, human remains were brought to the Leslie County Sheriff's Office that were discovered. In September of 2020, 2 suspects were arrested in connection to his disappearance. Tyler's former wife, Lena Michelle Collett North, and her boyfriend, former Leslie County Deputy Sheriff Jeremy Lewis. Police say their trial is set for later this year. With temperatures supposed to hit the 70s this weekend, the Wolfe County Search and Rescue Team is expecting a jump in the number of hikers. WYMT's Keaton Hall has more on what folks can do to stay safe when they hit the trails.
As the temperatures increase in the Commonwealth, so do the crowds at the Red River Gorge.
Busy season is upon us in the Red River Gorge. With temperatures in the 70s this weekend, we're expecting a crowd.
With an increase in hikers comes a jump in the need for rescues. Just Tuesday night, the Wolfe County Search and Rescue Team helped 2 hikers get home safely after they got lost.
Obviously, accidents happen, but like I said, planning ahead and knowing your route, having means of navigation, be that a GPS app like Gaia GPS on your phone or a map and compass and the knowledge of how to use those tools.
In addition to bringing essentials like navigation equipment, water, and extra layers, Stephen says it's important to plan ahead and let someone know where you're going.
You want to inform someone else where you're going and when they should expect you to be back. That way, in case something unexpected occurs, someone knows where you are.
He says it's also important to prepare for the crowds.
Increased visitation to the Red River Gorge. Oftentimes, trailheads are crowded or overfull, and you might have to change your plans for the day. So maybe have a plan of where you want to hike and then a backup plan in case that place doesn't work out.
In the varying spring temperatures.
While highs might be in the mid-60s to 70s, the lows can easily drop into the 30s and 40s, which that can get pretty cold if you're not prepared.
Looking forward to warmer weather, but not out of the woods just yet. Keaton Hall, WYMT Mountain News.
Stephen says it's important to always bring a light with you when you go for a hike, even if you only expect to be out during the day. A well-known Hazard businessman has died. Ray Linden died Monday at the Hazard ARH. He had a long career in the coal industry and owned and operated several businesses, including Linden Distributing. He just lost his wife of 73 years, Wanda, back in December. The visitation will be Saturday from 11 a.m. until the funeral at 1 at Maggard's Mountain View Chapel in Hazard. Ray Linden was 93.